Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. I'm Mark Givler. Got Kevin Noon with me here today. It's another hybrid half commitment breakdown, half positional update podcast today. We got to look at the New Jersey guys back to back here. We did Deshaun Stewart, safety. Now we're doing Dez Jones, 4-star wide receiver out of DePaul Catholic in North Jersey. Again, Kevin, we talked about this with Stewart a little bit surprising, and not so much just that he's in the class, almost as much as though we kind of went into the weekend, Jamie French and Vernell Brown and Talon Taylor and all these guys are on campus, and Dez Jones just kind of flies under the radar and casually becomes commitment number 3 of what would end up being a 4 commitment weekend. So, again, your thoughts as this kind of transpired, because nobody had this happening.
Yeah. Let you add a little inside information. A lot of times, if we feel somebody's on commit watch, we may or may not write a story just in case. We did not have a Dez Jones story ready. So, little bit of a, move out of left field. I think my initial thought was what's going on here? This was not a name that I'd been talking about. I hadn't really heard the name. Then I went in and, I know we're going to be watching his tape here in a second and we can kind of go into it more, but it started to make a little bit more sense. I was like, okay, I kind of understand. Ohio State lost the commitment of Jevin Boggs out of Cocoa, Florida. I think that Dez Jones kind of fills that role. And something that I said earlier on another show is we look at Ohio State's receiver room and we see a bajillion stars. What we don't see is a bajillion bodies. There's not as many receivers in that room as you might think. So very much like we just talked about on another show about defensive backs, I think that this is going to have to be a larger receiver class than you may think. And having somebody like Dez Jones, who I think really fits well coming out of the slot is, makes a lot of sense, because you look at a lot of these other guys and they probably are better suited to play outside.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. I've been fairly liberal with my numbers at receiver. I think some people said, 3 or 4. I said, oh no, it's 4. Is it 5? Is it actually 5? That's certainly something to consider here. I don't know if I'm ready to go there yet, but it appears to be on the table. Look, again, Kevin, you said it just a minute ago. I've said it a million times, both on the site and on the podcast. People recruiting against Ohio State claiming, it's such a crowded. There's not that many bodies. What they have is phenomenal. They've got 5 or 6 absolute dudes, but there's nothing behind that. They used to carry 13, 14 receivers when Urban was coaching, and they've got 8 or 9 guys right now. It's just this is going to be it for Buka. This is going to be it for Jaden Ballard, and you even look a little bit beyond that, and you start looking at someone like a Carnell Tate, and you wonder, well, is that going to be a 4-year player? Is Carnell Tate going to be a 4-year player? Is Brandon Ennis going to be a 4-year player? I think it's probably too early to start talking about Ennis in those terms yet, but Carnell Tate, for someone, the recent history suggests that if you have a true freshman year like Carnell Tate has, you're not going to see your senior year. That's just kind of been the trend. You can maybe throw Olave in there, though Chris didn't really do anything at all until very, very late November of his freshman year, whereas we kind of knew Carnell very early was going to be a part of the rotation. So, these are the things you have to consider. You wanted to sign 4 last year. You only ended up signing 2. And look, it's not too early to call Jeremiah Smith a 3 and done. So you've got to build some depth here with this receiver class. As much as you would like to have an instant impact guy or two to push the rotation next year, you also need some numbers here. And so it'll be interesting to see, again, what this means for their number. If the number is still just 4 and they just really like Dez Jones and they're going to have to make some very difficult decisions on some other guys, or if they would push this to 5. I personally think they would push it to 5, but we'll get into that in a minute.
Let's not forget too that the 2022 class, Kojo Antwi and Keon Grays, who are the only 2 guys left from that class, have not really cracked the field yet at this point.
Right.
And
yeah, we haven't put anyone in the portal yet, and we know the portal happens.
In the portal yet, but you have 2 guys that their clock is ticking, and their career receptions are very low, if any, and that room could get really thin really quick in terms of just bodies. So, I didn't mean to interrupt necessarily, but I knew we were about to go and watch the tape. And, I think people I'm sure are watching at home and they're like, well, what about the 22 class? And that's, very, very valid. Nothing has really stuck from that 22 class yet. So if you sit there and you have a whole year that nobody is really in the mix, you sometimes get what I like to call that recruiting bubble of where there's just nobody there. So it creates the need of where you have to kind of backfill to make it right.
No doubt. And again, we're not putting anyone in the portal, but we know guys go to the portal. Noah Rogers went to the portal this spring. Bryson Rogers went to the portal. He's back, but it's not unusual to lose 1 or 2 guys to the portal from a position group. So yeah, I mean, this could get really thin very quickly. And, like I said, I've danced around this a little bit, flip-flopped a little bit, just talking about it. But I think, let me try and phrase this correctly, because I think I've sent 2 different messages on my number of receivers here. I think I still don't know that the target number is actually 5, but I can give you guys a scenario or maybe even 2 scenarios where I'm fairly convinced they would push it to 5. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the target number, but I can cook up a scenario where they would go to 5, and we'll get to that in a minute. But let's talk about Dez Jones here. Again, great athlete. I think this is the guy that really kind of, Sean Stewart, his teammate, was like, okay, really, ball skills, toughness, physicality, cover skills. You see a lot of juice out of Dez. He's a guy who gets in and out of his breaks very smoothly, very quickly. Explosive guy, hits top speed quickly. Looks to be a tremendous route runner. Look at that. That was just a tremendous move. The body control to make that catch. So a guy who, again, like Kevin mentioned earlier, will operate pretty much exclusively out of the slot. I know Ohio State likes to cross-train guys, but when it comes time to get to campus, this will be a slot guy. Again, a little out and up there, balls underthrown, still adjusts, makes the catch. This is, again, so you like the quickness, you like the route running, you like the body control, all things that are absolute necessities to work out of the slot. Does a great job of creating separation. And, just a guy you watch and you get more and more impressed with as you watch the film, because he does something a little bit different on each play, whether it's a route, a cut he makes, a catch, different type of catch he makes. So it makes a ton of sense with Boggs now out of the class. And as we've said before, don't think Ohio State's going to revisit that one. Don't think Boggs is going to revisit that one. So you got to find some slot, at least one slot guy in this class, maybe probably 2. Just because of how much you utilize guys in the slot. But I like the pickup. I think he complements some of the other targets very well. Some of the bigger names, the Jamie Frenches, the DeCorian Moores, the Phillip Bells. There's a lot of guys out there that I think are mostly outside guys. So I think this works. I think the only other guy that they're recruiting right now who I would definitely kind of paint as a slot guy is Vernell Brown. And Vernell's kind of his own guy. I mean, he's very adept at playing outside. You could even put him in the backfield. So he's kind of I don't want to call him a gadget player because that's kind of disrespectful, but he's a very versatile guy who I think can play anywhere. So I think you could play him with Dez Jones. I think those guys are compatible. But yeah, I mean, it's just route after route. cut after cut with Dez on his tape. Just a really, really impressive guy, impressive quicks.
Yeah, with Vernal, he's not Curtis Samuel, but he's got a Curtis Samuel skill set, in my opinion, with what he can kind of do in a lot of different ways. But, back to Dez, I've watched his tape now maybe half a dozen times, and I do pick up something different each time. I mean, I noticed the first time, certainly he runs really crisp routes, and I think he has a good catch radius and the body control. And then you just see some other things. I mean, is he going to be the receiver in this class? Is he going to be the Jeremiah Smith that everybody's going to talk about 6 ways from Sunday? No, he's not. But not everybody necessarily is going to be that guy. We're talking about an alien when we talk about Jeremiah Smith. That just, they do not just, suddenly happen. They're very
I won't
rare.
talk about the 5-stars that they're recruiting as in the same breath as Jeremiah Smith in this class.
Right.
Not even, I mean, that's not a knock on Dez. I won't talk about Corey Moore is ranked number 1 receiver in the country. I will not put Corey Moore up with Jeremiah Smith.
Right. So it's one of these things that I think that, with this commitment happening in April, it may fly under the radar with a lot of people. But, keep an eye on this guy. I think he is a very solid player, and Ohio State, I think, is finally kind of figuring out. They went through their run of the Mookie Coopers of the world, who they just did not know how to deal with a player who was shorter than 5'10". I mean, you don't have that necessarily with Dez Jones, who's listed at 6 foot, which means he's probably 5'11", 5'10 and 3/4 or something. I've not seen him in person. Maybe we can find an excuse to go out to Wayne, New Jersey and go talk to these guys. But, I think that they're definitely finding guys that I think are going to work well in the system, especially when you have Chip Kelly, who is now going to take over more of the play calling and really designs what it is he does for the personnel that he has. And, I think that he's going to have a lot of fun using a guy like Dez Jones, who is capable of a lot of different attributes.
Everyone has to have their comparisons, so I will give one. Sometimes I'm reluctant to do them because sometimes I feel like it's forced, but I do, on film at least, and I kind of will reserve the right to change my mind on this as I kind of continue to evaluate him and see him in person at some point. He reminds me of Bryson Rogers, both around 6 feet tall. Bryson, similar strengths. If you said, what are Bryson Rogers' strengths? Well, you'd say his feet and his ability to use his quickness and route running to separate. That's what Dez Jones does. You would also say that he's short-handed and has great body control. That's also what Dez Jones shows you. So those are guys to me that are very similar receivers. And before anyone freaks out and says, well, Bryson Rogers was in the portal and, hasn't even done anything yet at Ohio State. Just wait. He's been having a tremendous spring. Ohio State fans are going to be very happy that Bryson Rogers decided to stay in Columbus. And so I can see the similarities there. And much like Bryson Rogers, Dez maybe started out a little lower ranked. He's kind of worked his way up a little bit, and we'll see if that continues to happen or not. He's at, again, one of the best programs in New Jersey, so he's going to get plenty of attention and evaluation opportunities there. But again, it's a good pickup for a class that's going to have 4 or 5 receivers. This is a nice pickup. This is a guy who, again, I think checks the boxes they want to check there from that slot role, because it's not your, as Kevin alluded to, with some of the guys they've had there, it's not your classic like 5'8", 5'9" little like gadget guy. Like they do like the 5'11", 6-footers in the slot that can. You still got to have a little size and toughness there in Ohio State's offense. You're running a lot of shallow crossers. You're blocking quite a bit. I think that's another reason that some of these other guys haven't worked in the past. You need a guy who frame wise is big enough to block as well. So good fit, good pickup. Let's dive into now what I was kind of alluding to earlier, which is, okay, it's got to be at least 4 receivers, but could they push it to 5? Well, I'm going to get them to 5. Here's how they get to 5. Vernell Brown, receiver X of your choice. If you want it to be Phillip Bell, if you want it to be Talon Taylor, whoever you like from that other group, and 2 guys they will not say no to, no matter what. between now and December, Jamie French, DeCorian Moore. If they get Jamie French and DeCorian Moore, I can almost guarantee you this will be a 5-man class, because both of those guys are guys you don't count in your numbers. You don't sit there and say, well, we've got Jamie French, or we're getting Jamie French, or we've got DeCorian Moore, or we're getting DeCorian Moore, because those are guys that you are going to have to cross your fingers until the letter of intent is faxed in, because they are not going to just fade. What would Mike Tyson say? Fade to Bolivia.
I'm going to fade off and go into Bolivia.
Into Bolivia. That's not going to happen here. Like, they're going to get massive NIL. You could have them committed for the next 6 months. Someone's going to come in December and try and shake this up with some just stupid NIL offer. So those are guys you wait until you've received the paperwork to count in your class. And in the meantime, you can't risk, you only got 2 out of the 4 you wanted last year. You can't risk a situation like that again, where you only sign 2 or 3 guys. So you're going to have to fill up in the meantime before you know for sure you're getting those guys, or if you're getting those guys. And so if that happens, if they end up ultimately getting French and DeCorian Moore, it's definitely going to be a 5-man class. Now, if they only get one of them, I could still argue with you that they'll go and take like Phillip Bell and, obviously Vernell Brown and maybe one other one, and then kind of wait and see. But this is going to be at least 4. Do you disagree?
No, I don't disagree. I think that 4 is kind of the basement number. And then, yeah, if it's the right 5, you take 5, because as you'd mentioned earlier, I mean, this is the end of the line for Emeka Egbuka. This is the end of the line for Jaden Ballard. I mean, we talked a little bit about the class of 2022. I mean, what if there's a departure there, whether it's post-spring or post-season? I mean, you're going to have to replenish the room. I mean, Jeremiah Smith and Mylan Graham can't catch everything. I mean, as great as they both are, and we have not had a chance to see any Mylan Graham as a summer enrollee, a regular enrollee. You give him a year, and I expect him to be up to speed and everything else. And, you have Tate and you have Ennis and you have Bryson Rogers, but you're starting to get thin. So, bringing in a class like that and letting them all compete with themselves and then kind of see where the dust settles from that 5. I mean, if you bring in 5 and 4 end up riding through and 1 ends up kind of bailing after a year, so be it. That's just how, modern roster construction is going to be in terms of college football. So there is a definite list of players that Ohio State is not going to say no to. And I think you've hit most of those names.
The only thing you just said that I would disagree with is you put Jeremiah Smith and the word can't in the same sentence. And I'm not sure we've actually got enough data to say there's something he can't do. So
I don't know if he can play inside and outside at the same time.
Let's see him fail to do it before we say he can't do it. How about that?
Well, fair enough. Fair enough. I even heard voices in my head, different voices than I usually hear, saying you probably shouldn't say can't with this guy. I mean, we're saying that he can. I mean, he could probably do about anything, but there are just some time space continuum things that I think might be out of his control.
Maybe. Mylan Graham, big time player. I'll put him in a weird hype land with Ohio State fans. I think Mylan Graham coming out. Now, there are things that are different that I'll get into in a second. I think Mylan Graham coming out of high school is as good of a prospect as Carnell Tate. That's how good I think Mylan Graham is. Now, Mylan Graham didn't get to play at IMG for 2 years. So there's a little bit of developmental stuff, strength and conditioning stuff, I think, where he's a little bit behind. He's also coming out in the summer. Carnell was able to be on campus in January. So that's a huge, huge, huge difference. So there are things that are different that I think will lend to this prediction of mine of him being on the level of Carnell Tate that will take maybe an extra year to manifest. I don't think it's going to happen this fall. I think next year we start to hear probably in the spring, we start to hear the buzz about, oh, this Mylan Graham's really good, but that's the caliber of prospect I think he is. So, to build off Kevin's point, they have 5 or 6 guys who I think are just phenomenal players, potential NFL guys, but you're a transfer away from being super, super thin in 2025 at the wide receiver position. And I don't care how good you are. I mean, Jeremiah Smith kind of breaks all the rules. Anyone other than Jeremiah Smith, like, you do not want to be relying heavily on true freshmen, really at any position. In a perfect world, I mean, you've got even the elite guys they've been able to ease in. They've eased in Carnell Tate. They eased in Chris Olave. They eased in Garrett Wilson. Go way back. They eased in Ted Ginn Jr. even. So there are things that, they're developmental things that have to take place before even the best receiver prospects can kind of take off. The ones not named Jeremiah Smith. So you want to get out in front of this to where you're not going into 2026 and saying, oh boy, I wish we would have taken more guys in 25 because now we need some true freshmen to help us. So this is just kind of, again, roster management 101 here. The other option, we haven't really discussed this, but there is one other scenario here. Take 4 guys this year and go portal hunting after the 2024 season and going and finding someone. Now that could be more difficult than one might think. Why you may be better off just taking 5 high school players, because you figure in 24 or after the 24 season, I mean, you figure it's going to be Tate, Innes, Smith. You're still going to have Bryson Rogers, presumably. Who's going to sign up for that?
Where you're having to compete with Mylan Graham to be the
right,
the 4th or 5th guy potentially. I mean, if you're a guy who's looking to, get your draft stock higher or whatever, I mean, unless you're going out and getting a top 3 national receiver or something like that,
which could have its own unintended consequences on someone like Brandon Innes or Carnell Tate or Bryson Rogers. So, I mean, yeah,
it's going to be hard.
That's kind of where my mind's at too.
Unless you're Marvin Harrison Jr. transferring to USC, which I'm still waiting for. I mean, I don't know who's going to be able to, how you're going to be able to pull that move off. It's probably better to have a 5-man class, easier to kind of stash. We talk about like international signings in the NBA, sign and stash or whatever, to be able to stash somebody. Okay, this is your your transitional year. You're going to learn the game. Oh, you can't play until you learn the block. You're going to play on special teams, whatever. Then you get into 26, and it's a much clearer path at that point. Where if you go out and get a 1-year rental, in that 1 year they're coming in as the 5th man. I mean, who's signing up for that?
Yeah, so I think the portal would be a difficult path. They've looked at that in the past. A couple years ago, they worked out some guys, and they were looking at maybe taking a portal receiver to fortify things, and it never came to fruition that year. But yeah, I think you're probably looking at the high school ranks when it comes down to it at the receiver position. I think there's other positions we can get into in a different podcast that they could go portal after the year for a starting caliber guy, but I don't think wide receiver is going to be one that is particularly going to make a lot of sense for any of the parties involved. So we will see. Again, great time to be on BuckeyeHuddle.com. We have a ton of recruiting coverage coming out of the big weekend. We're going to have more coming as the next couple weekends will also be interesting on the recruiting trail. If you sign up, we talked about this earlier. If you in the other episode, if you sign up for a month right now, you get through the spring game, you get all the April recruiting coverage. And you get at least the first half of our Southern Swing, where we go to the South and we watch practices, spring scrimmages, workouts, and talk to all the top Ohio State recruiting targets in the South. And this year we're going to be probably our most loaded list ever. And we have 2 new states that we've never stopped on Southern Swing for that we're going to stop in. And there may even be a third. So there is all sorts of stuff going on the site right now. That would just be happening in your first month. So give us a shot. If you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, give us a 5-star rating and subscribe to the feed. That'll help us with getting to other Ohio State fans. And if you're watching here on youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle, please subscribe to the channel and like the video so that, again, it will spit us out to other Ohio State fans who watch similar videos as you guys watch. So helps us with everything, with building our following and getting our information to more Ohio State fans. So appreciate everyone watching and listening, and we will talk to you again very soon.